Hey dudes, it's Larold, and this video is a bit of a follow-up to the last two we put out after patch 0.1.1. Those were both about Delirium and Simulacrum, and you should check them out if you haven't. This video will help round out exactly how all these mechanics come together into a single unified farm strategy, and tower maps are kind of the perfect example of that. So one big change that came with patch 0.1.1 is that Lost Tower maps are actually good now. You don't want to just slap your lowest tier garbage map into every tower and then zip to the end as fast as you can anymore. You want to treat these like legitimate maps, but there is a bit of room for optimization and efficiency above what I've already talked about in our previous videos. The economy changes and we're adapting with it. And speaking of economy, as more and more players are attempting to farm Delirium and needing to complete 4 Simulacrums before they can unlock all of their Atlas passive points, the price of Simulacrums has actually gone up throughout the week. That's right, unlike every time in PoE 1 where someone posts a new farm strategy and then everyone rushes in and all the prices bottom out and all the costs go way up, the increased interest in Delirium has actually made the strategy more profitable, not less. This is not what I expected, it's so different from how things work in PoE 1, but I kind of do like it. Maybe the design of 4 Simulacrums for passive points is good. I don't really think that it is, but it is certainly an interesting side effect of the design as it exists right now. So let's get into it, starting with the Lost Tower maps. So like I said, patch 0.1.1 reworked Lost Tower maps. The default tile set was swapped from the horrible Path of Mourning layout in Act 2 into the far superior, also from Act 2, Spires of Deshar layout. The patch also introduced 4 other tower map layouts. Alpine Ridge is the one that I've played around with the least. It's a really big map, not really all that much to say about it. Bluff is a long, thin, curvy line, by far the best. Mesa is kind of somewhere in between the two, and Sinking Spire uses the Vol Sun Temple layout. Now, I don't really love the Sinking Spire, but Bluff is amazing, and the other two are, I think, very good. The biggest difference between the maps before and after the patch is that they have a lot more monsters in them now. This means that juicing mechanics on the maps work, and they actually work really, really well, because the maps are packed, but they're not huge, so the mob density is really good. The only problem is that mechanics can't spawn on tower maps, with the exception of Corruption, which isn't really a League mechanic, at least in PoE 2 yet. And then, stuff like Shrines and Essences and Strongboxes. With that being said, you can instill the Waystones that you have with Delirium emotions. It's Delirium all the way down, folks. And it's incredibly good because the towers are generally very fast. 2 minutes is a pretty normal clear time for a tower, maybe even on the slow end. In my first Juice Tower map, I ran a Mesa, I got a Raw Divine, a Greater Essence worth about half of a Divine, and then another 2/3 of a Divine worth of Exalts, Chaos Orbs, and Simulacrum Splinters. Now, obviously, that's a bit of an outlier, right? That's kind of a best case scenario, really got me a nice taste, got me hooked. I can't guarantee a Divine and a Greater Essence in every tower, unfortunately, but given that the map only took 2 minutes, that's a pretty good haul even without either of those 2 big lucky drops. So even running maps with 0 prefixes and just a good amount of deliriousness, I've pulled upwards of 40 Exalts worth of Simulacrum Splinters and actual Exalts, as well as 5 or more tier 15 Waystones. So let's talk about what we're actually doing here. We're farming Simulacrum Splinters, kind of the usual pace here for the last week or so. These have increased in value over the past few days, up to about 60% of an Exalt apiece, so that's like 4/7 of an Exalt. Weird fraction, I know, but basically every 7 Splinters is about 4 Exalts. It's better than 2 Splinters is 1 Exalt. That's good. Now, deliriousness is kind of the key here. I've compared a lot of Simulacrum Splinter drop rates in maps using deliriousness, quantity, and Waystone drop chance, all as variables to see what really impacts the amount of Splinters you get. I've run 6 prefix maps, 6 suffix maps, and also 8 and 10 mod maps, maps with very low deliriousness, maps with over 110% deliriousness, and all the possible kinds of combinations that would entail. And also, just to preemptively answer some questions, I've tested map tier, I've tested player item rarity as well. I don't think player item rarity matters at all for Splinters. It does make currency drops better, so it's good to have, but it's not necessary for Splinter farming. And then for map tier, I do think it's just like Breach, where lower tier maps, if you're doing this on a tier 5 map, you're really not going to get very many Splinters. Even doing like a tier 13, I found that I was getting what felt like 20% fewer Splinters than I would on a tier 15. So you always want to run kind of at the bare minimum tier 14 and up, but 15 and 16 is ideal. So the drop rate of splinters absolutely appears to be tied to deliriousness. I didn't really find any relationship between item quantity on the waystone or waystone drop chance on the waystone with my simulacrum splinter results in each map at all. And just to really underline it here, deliriousness is the main factor for simulacrum splinter farming. More monsters, more pack size, these are helpful, but they're not nearly as important. Deliriousness is not all that matters for farming in general because mobs do still drop currency and items and we want more quantity, but for what we're doing on our towers and on our kind of setup maps, deliriousness is more important than map mods. So in these tower maps, which are generally smaller and more densely packed than standard maps, we're making use of instilled emotions, but with a bit of a twist. So if I pulled up my Delirium tab here, Distilled Paranoia is kind of seen as the gold standard of distilled emotions from Delirium right now. In fact, if I pull up Alva here, you can see Distilled Disgust, which is supposed to be 2 steps up in rarity from Paranoia, is only worth about 2.6 Exalted Orbs each, and then Paranoia, again, supposedly about 2 steps in rarity lower, is actually worth more. Now we're able to go over to the Reforging bench and throw in 3 of a type of emotion. I guess I don't want to do that with Paranoia. We can do that with Greed, the one that is 1 step down from Paranoia. You can throw in 3 of these, press Reforge, and you can 3-to-1 them up in quality. But you can't 3-to-1 them or 1-to-3 them down, right? So this creates this bit of a weird step here where because you're able to use these to anoint your amulet, but also then to instill your map, they kind of increase in value up to Paranoia, which is like higher value than Envy or Disgust, even though Envy and Disgust are less common and also give more deliriousness. So there's this kind of weird fall off after Paranoia into Envy. Like if we compare that here, Paranoia worth about 3.3 Exalts apiece, Envy worth about 1.76, so about half as valuable. Now we can look here on the wiki and kind of see the relative deliriousness values, right? The reason that Paranoia is so good is because it adds rare monsters, but it only adds 12% deliriousness per emotion. We can get 15% from Envy for basically half the price, or we can get 18% even from Disgust for, like 70% of the price. Like the price difference between Envy and Disgust, it doesn't even double. Basically what this is all boiled down to is that Distilled Envy is cheaper than Paranoia, but potentially more rewarding when it comes to farming simulacrum splinters on relatively low value tile sets and on maps that don't have very good prefixes. And that is really only because of the higher deliriousness that it grants, although admittedly the waystone drop chance can be good as well. Alright, apologies for the jump cut. It took me a second here to actually find a map that had bad prefixes, but here we go. This is a map with pretty terrible prefixes. We've got rare monsters have 1 additional modifier, not great, pack size, and then additional packs of Iron Guards. This is a pretty terrible map. So rather than throw this map away, what I would want to do is just simply anoint it with or instill it with Envies in order to get it to drop more waystones. And that will increase the waystone drop chance. It'll also put more deliriousness on it. And then I would throw this map, I would corrupt it and kind of hope for 6 suffixes instead of these crappy prefixes. And then I would throw it in and run this as my map that I use in a tower map or in any sort of setup map. Now, as I said, Distilled Envy has kind of been my go-to, in large part because it gives you more waystones, and generating more waystones synergizes really well with Get Out of My Head in the Delirium tree to give you just 20% chance for your maps to be, or waystones to have random instilled emotions. So these pre-instilled waystones, like Grim Choice here, are how we really get the big splinter drops in towers because they have a pretty decent chance to be instilled with high value essences like Isolation and Suffering. These are way too expensive to ever intentionally use on a map and hope to see a profit, but it's something that you just pick up and it has 70% deliriousness or 100% deliriousness on it. That's pretty good. Now you could and you want to use these for regular good juicing maps if they get quantity and rare monster and rarity rolls on them, that's great. But sometimes they get terrible prefixes like Secluded Resolve here. And it's a valuable emotion, you don't want to just throw it away. So instead, rather than wasting a bunch of Chaos Orbs on it trying to roll it to be good, I've played that game, it's a bad gamble, what you want to do is either finish it off with Distilled Envies if you want to farm more Waystones, or Distilled Disgust if you want to farm more tablets, and then there you go. That's pretty much all you do. The thing is anointed up with 3 instilled up with 3 emotions, and now you can slap it into your towers. And now instead of getting maybe 5 exalts and 1 or 2 waystones from a random tower you didn't bother to choose, you can haul in 40 plus exalts worth of simulacrum splinters and 4 to 5 waystones. This also means on average that one of those waystones will probably wind up being emotional, and maybe one of those emotions is valuable, and now you've got yourself a whole self-sustaining economy. This has been working really well for me. And here's how we tie it all together. When you're working your way into a new area on the Atlas, in a section where you haven't activated the towers and you don't have any juicing mechanics set up, you want to use the same approach. You want to take these maps like Secluded Resolve and put them into the bad map areas like Deserted here, and run these areas with waystones that have high waystone drop chance and a lot of deliriousness, so that you can then get simulacrum splinters and waystones out of it. By getting more waystones, you get more chances for good juicing once you are set up on all the towers in that area, and then you save the good maps with quantity and rarity and rare monsters on them for the maps that already have towers buffing them, and you instill those with paranoia if available, unless you manage to get lucky on a map that dropped with a high value emotion already attached like I did with Grim Choice. I've pulled down over 100 splinters and a dozen T15 waystones in maps that I have set up and then run like this, and again, these aren't even the juiced maps. I'm talking about the bad maps, the setup maps. So with all that being said, I've pretty much been able to self-sustain maps just on the emotional maps that I find on the ground that are tier 15. I've also gotten tons and 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 tons of maps along the way. And something that is actually a bit of a change of pace from how I had said in the past, I actually am running instilled maps even on maps like, say, this Willow that would have a Delirium mirror icon on them. I'm usually just running instilled maps because, for one, I have so many, and I tend to make more currency from them than I do from the mirrors. It's working out really well. And then finally, just so there are absolutely no questions left over at the end, I'm sure there will be, but you do want to shove in tablets that have increased quantity of items into your towers at the end of the tower. You know, you can run whatever you like in terms of mechanic. I think most of my quantity maps are just like precursor tablets or delirium tablets, kind of makes sense. But you know, you could do breach, you could do pretty much anything is fine except for expedition, which sucks, but quant is really what's important. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it. Patch 0.1.1 has been really good for PoE 2's endgame. I can see the vision starting to take shape, and it's really promising. I can't wait until we have more league mechanics, classes, and skills to work with, but this is feeling much closer to a complete product compared to what we had available to us prior to the patch. And this was just a little patch that they slammed out in the first week back from the holiday break, so that really does inspire a lot of confidence in me. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and good luck in your towers. Bye.